Greetings and salutations to the viewers of this video. I'm a student from Tottenham Boys College, and today I am making a future fleet proposal for the Royal New Zealand Navy. The focus of this proposal will be looking into the historic service of the Royal New Zealand Navy, translating the mission requirements into specifications, and then recommending existing ships that are in service with other navies that are able to fit the specs whilst retaining at more or less a decent budget. To start off with, New Zealand's naval history goes back a fair way. During the early colonial days, we had relied on the Royal Navy to defend our shores. In 1868, Queen Victoria declared that all colonies would pay a subsidy to provide for defense in territorial waters. With our first subsidy, we acquired the Pearl-class light cruiser HMS Phoenix, which was renamed HMS Tauranga, and that would be the cruiser on the left side. Along with her, we utilized spar torpedo boats, like the one on the right, along with river monitors as well. During the First and Second World Wars, the New Zealand Division prioritized escort duties and fought as a supporting force with the Royal Navy and corresponding Commonwealth countries. Though in the First World War, after it, Admiral Jellicoe actually decided that we should have a fleet composition of this standard: one aircraft carrier, 3 light cruisers, 3 destroyers, and 6 submarines, I believe it was. It's a tall order, but was definitely trying to make a division out of it. During the time the Navy operated small patrol craft and corvettes, like the one on the top left. That is a photograph of HMNZS Arbutus. The largest vessels primarily being light cruisers. The only case aside from that would be HMS New Zealand, the battle cruiser on the top right. Though she was completely crewed she wasn't necessarily crewed fully by New Zealanders, and she was still technically under the direct command of the Royal Navy, and she was also a gift ship to the Royal Navy. The last light cruiser, HMS Royalist, which is on the bottom left, was decommissioned in 1966 as we made the switch to frigates. The reason that we made this switch was more or less because frigates and destroyers, during the time of guided missiles, they became far more versatile than their cruiser and battleship counterparts during this time. And as we moved on, New Zealand's sort of mindset remained to this more supportive mindset, where we support our allies in doing so, because we're a small country, we don't have a lot of material or capital to actually spend. This way of thinking is seen today in the Anzac frigates that we are operating in terms of offensive capability. They are equipped with a single dual-purpose 127mm cannon, 2 triple torpedo tubes for anti-submarine warfare, and a Vulcan Phalanx Sea Whiz, and currently being upgraded with CAM-M Sea Scepter missiles for anti-aircraft defense. The long-range strike capabilities of these ships are handled by the Super Sea Sprite helicopters that are a part of the 6th Squadron, utilizing Penguin missiles and AGMs. The slide that you see here lists down all of the mission requirements for the Royal New Zealand Navy to maintain. Now, a friend of mine gifted me some inside knowledge with essentially some scholarship articles written on Inline. What they described was that whether or not the Royal New Zealand Navy should, expand or just remain as it is. Though initially it was trying to find suitable replacements for the frigates. But one on the last report, what caught my attention was that the government was starting to look into solutions for climate change and implementing them into our Navy. I don't believe this is a good idea, as when you look at climate change, it is a seriously massive problem. But in here, I'm only going to be recommending ships that I believe are going to have good use and will be exponentially useful to not only us as a territorial nation of the Commonwealth, but also to our allies such as Australia, the US, Britain, France, all of those allies, especially considering what's been going on in the South China Sea at this moment. So, from what I can infer from the mission requirements, we need ships that are essentially good in both an offensive and defensive stance, some form of icebreaker to travel through the Ross dependency, like, well, not as grandiose as the picture that I sourced, which is essentially a Russian nuclear powered icebreaker. Be adaptable to different strategic situations, i.e., having some form of modularity to it. And lastly, being able to operate both independently and within a task force with other navies. The first ship that I believe would fit the bill is the Freedom class littoral combat ships. Now, these ships actually provide a very enhanced capability compared to the Anzac frigates. The ship having a modular design. So essentially, it can come with different mission packages from Lockheed and Martin's because the Freedom class specifically comes from Lockheed and Martin themselves. So it should be easy to get our hands on them. And considering that we're going to be making a deal for the C-130Js, this will definitely become useful to us in the future. Essentially, with the modularity, they can be modified to fit any requirement for mission specs. They have a near fully automated system, which requires fewer crew, from about as few as 50 to a maximum of just under 100, which is a significant drop. And they're also capable of speeds of 40 plus knots, utilizing a combined diesel and gear gas turbine water jet system. The cost I calculated during the initial construction for this in US dollars is about $514 million per unit, but they would be well worth it. If we can field at least one more unit than the Anzacs, it's a definite contender for a blue water force. The second ship that I believe would be a very good addition to the Royal New Zealand Navy would be the R class icebreaker. This icebreaker is a medium icebreaker rated at Arctic level 3. By that, it means that it can go through close to a meter of ice at 3 knots. The purpose of a ship like this would be to essentially fill in the role that the Protector class offshore patrol vessels can't, essentially patrol within the Ross dependency itself inside all of the ice fields. Pricing for this vessel was a bit difficult to find, but judging by it, I'd actually guesstimate that it's around $3 million due to the nature of it. Well, $300 million, I should say. It's only able to go at a speed of about 16 knots, but it actually has a fairly high efficiency as it can cruise at 13.5 knots for about 15,000 nautical miles. if it was modified to meet the specs of the Royal New Zealand Navy, we could be looking at a ship of a similar price to HMNZS Aotearoa, though significantly smaller, but still a fairly heavy weight. The last ship that I'm recommending is the Dokdo class amphibious assault vessel. The ship would actually act as both a landing and support ship. It has enough room in the hull to store 4 medium landing craft and 15 helicopters, along with around about 200 vehicles, well, ground vehicles, I should say. It's able to operate vertical takeoff and landing aircraft with thrusters, and it's actually for a fair price. The ship costs about the same as HMNZS Aotearoa. This ship would be perfect since the Air Force is remaining with large fixed wing aircraft and helicopters, and it could be used as an aircraft maintenance ship for other navies to utilize. But a big up is that the ship is actually on the smaller side of ships with similar capabilities to it, and could be modified to a decent degree if it needed to. The only other ship that would actually have similar specs to it, but would have fairly enhanced capabilities, would be the Japanese Hyuga class destroyer helicopter. Well, helicopter destroyer, I should say. Which I'm guesstimating would actually cost about half of the defense budget for similar specs. So, in conclusion, I believe that these ships, or ships of similar specs and orientation, would be useful to the Navy in the future. The situation in the Pacific is definitely starting to change as China is expanding its influence. At some point, we need to realize that as a resident of the Pacific, we have an obligation to maintain it. The government may think that climate change should be the main focus of the Defense Force for incorporating new weapon systems and vehicles, but I don't believe this is true. The main focus of any defense force is the defense of the defense of territory and the support of allies during hostilities. Defense and security of one's nation is always to be a top priority. But I do believe that what's going on at the current moment, it can subside. Well, thank you for watching, and if you have any sort of feedback, please leave some notes down in the comments. I'd actually really like to figure out if I've done something right or if there's something I need a little bit of cleaning up on. So, thanks for watching.